Hi and welcome to the SLR Digital Photography course. I'm Stephen Riley and I'll be your host and guide as we explore the amazing world of digital photography. This course is designed to give you the confidence to be able to shoot at a professional level, whether you're shooting weddings, babies, portraits or landscapes. In this course we cover the fundamentals of digital photography, including a hands-on approach of the different settings on your camera. We'll also give you the different tricks that professionals use to make sure they always have that perfect shot. So let's get started, shall we? Firstly, I'd like to outline what are the fundamentals that make up a great shot. You'll be able to follow through with me in the course as we explain how you can achieve each one of these fundamentals and in turn improve your photos dramatically. Note carefully, professional photographers always make a lot of mistakes. Even the most celebrated photographers. You only get to see these amazing shots in their portfolio, but be sure there are loads of mistakes to get that perfect shot. If you aren't making mistakes, then you're not pushing yourself. So push yourself with your shots. It doesn't matter if it turns out bad, just delete it. A great shot is made up of 50% composition and 50% knowledge on how to use a camera, and on some occasions, a good stroke of luck. The following advice will help you improve your percentage of usable shots. Instead of getting 2 to 3 good ones out of 30 to 40 shots, you'll be looking at 50% or higher strike rate. Firstly, avoid camera shake. This is the single biggest problem in getting quality shots and it cannot be fixed afterwards in a photo editing program. Secondly, learn to compose your picture properly using rules like the rule of thirds and isolating the subject to make it clear. Even in a landscape scene, a good photographer draws our eye into a specific part of the photo. Also learn to introduce structure through your shots through using leading lines and depth of field. Learn to expose your picture properly. We'll teach you the tricks of the pros using exposure compensation and exposure bracketing to avoid under or overexposed photos. It's like a professional's ace in a poker match. You've got to learn to frame your picture properly. Would it look better as a horizontal or vertical shot? Did I fill up the frame with the subject? You've got to get in close and fill up the frame. Also, check that unwanted items are not in the shot. Could it be improved by cropping? Try to shoot with a tripod or monopod where possible. You've got to learn to use focus lock and always use the highest resolution and highest quality settings. Remember, we don't pay to process our shots and buying an extra memory card won't break the bank. It seems like a lot of things to think about before you press a button, but these things will quickly become second nature to you. If you stick to these fundamentals, you'll be able to deliver great photos in a range of difficult situations. One of the best ways to avoid camera shake is with a good sturdy tripod. A professional almost always shoots with one. If you're shooting sports, a good choice to reduce camera shake is with a monopod. It's easy to pan on moving subjects and it's light and portable. A good tool for travellers is the GorillaPod. It's excellent for holding your camera in creative angles and molds onto just about anything. I even use my GorillaPod for holding my off-camera flash. Next step is to try to remove yourself away from the camera with a shutter release. It's a simple, affordable solution. The release attaches onto the side of your camera. You can upgrade to a shutter release and timer combined. And you can use this for time-lapse photography. They are a little bit more expensive. The only problem with this is that you're still connected to the camera, so there is a chance of camera shake. So instead, you can use remote control. You are completely removed from the camera, which guarantees a steady shot. If all else fails, you can use a timer on the back of your camera. You just set it, step backwards, and the shot is taken without camera shake. Another way to reduce camera shake is with one of these, a simple bean bag. You place it on the surface, you get your camera and you mold it through into the beans and you can get some great angles here and it's there, rock solid. So there you go, look at the angles you can get here from this. And there you go, it's molded in and it's very solid. Another simple way to look at reducing camera shake is to actually look at the way that you're taking the photograph. A lot of people get a really good shot and then as they're about to take the photo, they sort of jab away really hard and that causes camera shake as you're pushing through like this. A simple way to reduce that is to control your breathing. So you breathe in deeply as you're about to take the photo, and then you exhale slowly and squeeze the trigger. There you go. So you breathe in, focus, slowly exhale and press the button. So there you go. If camera shake causes 90% of our problems in our images, there are a number of great ways there to avoid it. Holding your camera properly is one of the easiest ways to reduce camera shake, and many people seem to get it wrong. It's just quite simple. You get your strap, wrap it around twice like this, which gives you a grip through here. Place a hand here, make yourself almost like a human tripod, where you've got one section here, another section of the tripod here. Bring your arms in, place your hand underneath your lens, breathe in. As you're exhaling, take the shot. Some of the best long exposures I've done at night have been handheld without a tripod. You get to a really nice scene, you're there with your camera, you don't have a tripod, so what do? I'll show you this quick, easy method where you can get 5 to 10 second exposures at night without a tripod. First of all, you've got to find yourself something to lean or push against. For example, this tree. You get through, push yourself across, get yourself in position, and there you go. You can do a 5 second exposure, handheld, straight away there. Find yourself something solid, get a few points of contact in, and there we go. Easy 5 second exposure, handheld. Not all that much really to get hold of, it's just a tree here. So you get your body through in your lens, lock it in, 5 second exposure, handheld. No tripod, no problem at all. A good general rule to avoid camera shake is to shoot at a speed higher than your camera lens. For example, this lens here is a 50mm lens. This means you'll need to shoot at a speed above 1/50th of a second to avoid camera shake. The longer the lens, the more it magnifies camera shake. Here with this 30mm lens, I could get away with shooting above 1/30th of a second. But if I move here to this 100mm lens, I'll need to increase the speed to over 100th of a second. So remember, always shoot above the speed of the lens that you're shooting with. With cameras just getting better and better, one of the biggest differences between a normal photo and a work of art is your composition. One of the first rules to learn is the rule of thirds. This dates back thousands of years and is sometimes referred to as the golden section. In your viewfinder, draw 2 horizontal lines and 2 vertical lines. Most cameras have this grid inbuilt into their camera and you only need to switch it on. Firstly, look at your horizontal lines. Having your horizon in the middle of the shot looks boring, but placing it a third up or a third down is preferred and improves your composition dramatically. Then look at your verticals. Instead of having the subject in the middle of the frame, try moving the subject to the left third or to the right third. This is the basis of the rule of thirds. The trick is to place your subject along the intersection of the lines. Most beginners start by placing the subject smack bang in the middle of the frame. Try to start using the rule of thirds and you'll see your photos are instantly much better. One of the keys to using this method is to use exposure lock. You aim at the subject and lock down the focus and then recompose according to the rule of thirds. The rule of thirds helps you emphasize specific parts of your photo. For example, if you'd like to emphasize the ocean, you'd bring the horizon up to the top third of the frame. If you'd like to emphasize the sky, you bring the horizon to the bottom third of the frame. So switch on your grid and start to use the horizontals and verticals to improve your composition using the rule of thirds. Leading lines are a simple but dramatic way to make a difference in the composition of your images. You can use them to create a depth of field and lead the viewer to focus in on a subject. Leading lines can be found everywhere, man-made and in nature, so always keep a lookout for them. Take a look at this example here. So here we are set up on the wharf. We've got a really nice shot here, and we're going to start to show you how to use leading lines. So let's move back a bit and get a shot without leading lines. One of the best tools you can use is actually your feet. So if you step back, change your angle of your camera through a little bit and start to pick up the lines which direct our eye directly through to the model, and looks really good that way. Getting the right exposure is not as hard as it seems, as long as you tell the camera which part of the scene you want exposed. Modern day metering gets it right about 90% of the time, but here are some modes that will help you get it right every time. You'll find that most cameras have 3 to 4 different metering modes: evaluative or multi-metering, partial metering, spot metering, and center weighted metering. We'll focus on the 3 main modes. Matrix metering. The camera takes into account the whole scene in front of it and then adjusts the exposure accordingly so everything is exposed on average. This mode is useful for general scenes but cannot expose properly in tricky lighting situations. Spot metering. This metering method measures the middle 1% of the scene. It's extremely accurate on that section and disregards the rest of the image. This method is used mainly in scenes where there is a big contrast and the most important part is in the center of the frame. For example, a backlit scene. Center weighted metering. This metering method concentrates on the middle 70% of the shot and the outside the frame is less significant. In summary, if you'd like the whole scene metered, then choose matrix metering. If the center of the image is more important to you, then you would choose center weighted metering. If nothing else matters in the shot, just the subject in the center, you can safely use spot metering. This is a classic scene to use spot metering. You've got a backlit scene here where you can almost hardly see the subject because the sun's so bright, and you take a few shots in matrix metering and all you end up is a silhouette because the camera's trying to take a photo for the whole scene in front of you. You can try center weighted, but it still won't do much good. So the only real way you can do this is by using your spot metering and go up close to the subject and aim your spot metering right on the center of the face, and you'll see that the camera will just meter for the face, blows the background out a little bit, but you'll get a really good picture of the subject in front of you. In certain lighting conditions, your camera can get confused and give you the wrong exposure. This is where the exposure compensation comes in handy. You can use it to increase or decrease your exposure by 1 full stop to achieve a properly exposed photo. Here's an example of it in action. When you've got a brightly lit scene outside and the inside has got a different exposure level, you can start to use your exposure compensation. So to do this is we take a shot through here. We see the outside's brightly lit, but we can't really make out the features of the model's face. So we start to just bring up our exposure compensation there. I've moved up half a stop here, and we start to see the features of the face starting to come out. And so we move through again, another full stop. Start to see the back blowing out, but the model's face coming brightly lit. So I'll just push it a little bit more. And you see there that we're really starting to blow it out through our exposure compensation. So we'll just move it back a little bit. There we go. All the features are coming through the model. So you can use this to bring up the level of the subject through our exposure compensation. So remember, When your subject is overexposed or underexposed, you can simply use exposure compensation for a great shot. This is a common scene with photographers and a very common problem. You have a scene in front of you that is very hard to expose for. The camera is torn between exposing for the bright sunny day outside and exposing for the darker interior. There is an explanation. We are born with this super camera in our head. It's better than any Sony, Canon or Nikon. Our eyes see about 24 stops of light, but unfortunately our cameras see only about 14 stops of light. So you have a problem. How can we increase the range of our camera to see the same scene as we do and get the right exposure? This brings us on to one of the tricks of professionals, exposure bracketing. You dial in how many stops you want to bracket and the camera under or overexposes to those levels. In this example, I've taken a few different photos to show the range you can obtain. I chose one of the shots that looked the best and adjusted the lighting slightly in Photoshop. If I had really wanted to, I could have used a process called HDR and I could have joined two exposures together. Luckily my exposure was good enough to use. You can use exposure bracketing at any time and it's insurance for those times you don't get a second chance to get the right exposure. Getting the right exposure is up to you and what you want to be doing with your exposures creatively. Here I'm going to be shooting a couple of different exposures using a wide aperture and a small aperture. When you use a wide aperture and you have it completely open, your depth of field is almost razor thin. Just behind her starts to blur out. So we'll take a shot here and we start to blur out the background. But as we start to change it through, and I'll move it up to around about f4, you see the background start to come into focus. So I'll move it up a little bit more here. So we got f8, and we can start to see the trees and the scene behind the model starting to come into focus. So I'll just move through a little bit higher again. So there we are, f11, and you can start to see the trees really coming into focus here, and we'll move all the way down to f16. Now it's f16 and 1/20th of a second, so we'll probably get a bit of movement in this shot. So if you're seeing that shot, everything's in focus at f16, but at f1.4 the model's in focus, but the background's completely out of focus. Taking photos on a bright sunny day is not the ideal situation, but it's a common event for most of us. So let's look at some ways that we can combat this bright sun. I'm using today one of these. It's a 5-in-1 reflector. They range from around $30 up to $150, but after you see its uses today, you'll find they're invaluable. These are great, these reflectors. They're cheap as opposed to a flash or anything like that. There's nothing in them to break. There's no mechanical faults or anything like that. It's just a simple reflector. You don't need to color correct after you've been using a reflector as well, because you're reflecting the ambient light in the photo, where usually you need to use gels to color correct flashes. There are a couple of disadvantages as well though. Unfortunately, you're either going to need an assistant to hold the reflector, or you need one of these. This is a special clamp which holds the reflector for you. The only problem with these is when it gets a bit windy, they tend to sort of knock over unless you've got a few sandbags on them. But besides that, this is a great investment. I'm starting out here with using the diffuser part of the reflector kit to diffuse the sun. You need to get that diffuser between the sun and your subject. What you are doing is modifying the light from a small harsh light to a big diffuse light. It fills the subject with a nice even light. Next we used a gold reflector. The gold reflector added a warm feel to the model. We changed the angles of the reflector to fill in the shadows. You can vary the intensity of the fill by moving it further away from the subject. It really gives you that afternoon sunset feel. As you change to the silver, you increase your highlights and the contrast of the shot. Here we use the white reflector. The white reflector is a great way to fill in the shadows in the face, and it doesn't have that high contrast the silver reflector gives you. Sometimes changing a reflector is like an IQ test, and I have failed badly. Thank God I've got my assistants. One of the most underused things on a camera during daylight is your flash. Most people use your flash at night, but the best time to use it is actually during the day, as you use it as fill-in flash to take out the shadows out of the face. So let's take a few shots here using our fill-in flash. You can also vary the intensity of your fill-in flash by using your flash exposure compensation. So you can raise it up or lower the flashing compensation to reduce or increase the amount of flash on the face. Most people think when you're shooting outside that you've got to shoot with your back to the sun. The problem with that is you've got your model or your subject staring directly up towards the sun and squinting, and the shots invariably come out bad. The best way to do it is actually reverse that and have your model with the sun behind her and you shooting through, and as you do that you'll see that you start to get these really nice highlights coming through the hair, and you can use your flash to start to illuminate and take the shadows out of the face as well. And that's the best way to do it. You put the model, the back to the sun, you come through and you fill in the shadows and you get that really nice look. Look at that, that's a great shot. Excellent. Another tip when you're shooting outdoors is to always use one of these, a lens hood. They dramatically reduce lens flare, which is a real nightmare when you're shooting outside. An alternative to shooting out in the bright sun is to simply move into the shade. We've moved under the shade of this tree, and as you look in the shade you'll find that there's a sweet spot in the shade. As we move around, so we ask the subject to move around, we start to move around here, and then you look at the face and you see there it is. There's the perfect angle where the face is correctly illuminated in the shade. So next time you're shooting the shade, make sure you look out for that sweet spot. One common mistake an amateur makes is that when it's cloudy, they tend to put the camera away and wait for a bright sunny day. It's very difficult to achieve good shots shooting portraits in bright sunlight. The sun is a harsh light that brings out many shadows and isn't usually kind to faces. In a portrait studio, the lights they use are very soft, diffused lights. A cloudy day is perfect for portraits. The clouds form a natural diffuser and give you a beautiful, soft light for portraits. Framing your picture properly is what makes a difference between a good shot and a great shot. One of the best pieces of equipment you can use here is often the cheapest as well, your legs. A great shot usually means you have to take a different angle, up high or low, and move around to get a new perspective. Try this simple experiment at home or in the park. Grab your camera and a friend and start to shoot using different angles and different objects in the environment to frame the subject. Make sure you're really getting close and feel the frame as well. You will see that these simple, easy changes will produce a much more professional looking shot for a minimal amount of effort. Making sure